After discharging the first version of a rational account, the idea that I have a true opinion together with reasons for my opinion, the discussants turn to a second potential theory about what counts as a good rational account, what differentiates true opinion that is accidental from true opinion that is knowledge. This theory says that a rational account consists of an enumeration of the elements together with their relations. Now, this is spelled out in the dialogue by talking about this example of knowing how to spell Theaetetus. Now, this is a very powerful metaphor within Greek culture because for the Greeks, the most important part really of being Greek, what people generally used to identify themselves as Greek or not, was their ability to speak and or write Greek. So there's a powerful analogy within the dialogue for the target audience. And the idea is I know how to spell Theaetetus because I know which syllables I need to use and the order in which I need to write them in order to spell that word. I have a knowledge of the elements and their relations in order to create that whole. Now, the discussants, led by Socrates, reject this account for two reasons. And these are reasons that we see emerging again and again in this analysis of knowledge. The first reason, look, having a rational account doesn't actually differentiate accidental or non-praiseworthy true opinion from knowledge or praiseworthy true opinion unless there's a reason why it's a good rational account. And so a mere opinion about the elements and their arrangement doesn't meet that bar. In other words, suppose that you asked me how to spell Theaetetus, and I am neither Greek nor a particularly good speller. In fact, I am dyslexic, so I'm pretty bad. And I tell you, I just happen to give you the syllables and their proper order. Now you've got the count, but your count probably doesn't make your true opinion more likely to have been true. The reasons you give aren't reasons that make you seem justified in holding the view that you do, that differentiates you from someone who just got lucky. It seems like you just got lucky. And so having a rational account for bad reasons, that doesn't really seem to work. And nothing about this version really helps us there. But the second, probably more important objection is the objection that they raise in a very metaphysical fashion. The idea that, well, look, this notion of knowledge, it makes appeals to knowledge. Knowledge of parts in their arrangement is what it is to have a rational account. And so in order for our definition/theory to actually be informative, to actually help us to understand what it is to know something in a way that doesn't just say, well, you start off by knowing this stuff, and then you use that to know this stuff, right? Then we have to be able to take that definition and apply it to the initial case. So a knowledge of the syllables and their relations explains our knowledge of how to spell Theaetetus. But in order for that definition/theory to work, we have to be able to get to a point where we're no longer just appealing to some primitive notion of knowledge. And this is what that discussion about parts and wholes and is the all the same as the whole and so on, what that's really speaking to. Because the idea here is, well, I've got syllables and their order. So if I want to have a knowledge of a particular syllable, I've got to have a knowledge of its elements together with the relations. So the letters and their relationship when you spell that syllable. And he says, so I can take my definition and I can do it again. And now it looks like I'm in a better position, right? So now I just have to have a knowledge of letters and their arrangements to form a particular syllable. Oh, but wait, I'm still using knowledge. I still haven't explicated that notion. So I apply it again, but now Plato says we're stuck, / Socrates says we're stuck, because letters are primitives here. We don't have elements of those letters, and their relations are just as are in this account. And so we can't recursively apply our definition. Now our knowledge becomes this sort of mysterious primitive, which was what we were hoping to avoid by forwarding a theory of knowledge in the first place. The third and final view suffers essentially the same problems. So the final view that the group considers is the notion of a rational account as a knowledge of the difference between that known and other things. So I know how to spell Theaetetus because I know how to differentiate a spelling of Theaetetus from a spelling of Theodorus. I know how to categorize triangles because I know how to differentiate squares and circles from triangles. So this theory says, look, in order to know something, you have to be able to discriminate it from other things. Socrates again rejects this view, and for the two reasons that we saw before. The first reason he says is, look, if we can't differentiate Theaetetus from Theodorus, then it doesn't really make a lot of sense to say that we have an opinion about Theaetetus. Right? In order to have the concept of something, you have to have the concept of something that gives you an understanding of the difference between that thing and other relevant things. So a concept of Theaetetus has to have, as part of being the concept, an ability to differentiate Theaetetus from Theodorus. Otherwise, we have a sort of hybrid concept, Theaetetus or Theodorus. Right? Same thing with triangle. In order to have a concept of triangle, you have to have a concept that differentiates triangularity from circularity, from, I don't know what you call it, rhombosity, and so on. And so he says, look, it seems like that notion of a rational account is just a prerequisite for having a concept or having an account at all, having a knowledge of something at all. But the most important objection he has is that, look, again, it looks like the problem here is that our notion of rational account, something that's really going to differentiate accidental or irresponsible true opinion from praiseworthy or knowledgeable true opinion, that's got to have some sort of epistemic status itself. It's got to be, ideally, something that we know. And so he thinks that these last two accounts particularly seem to presuppose knowledge of our theory of a rational account, knowledge of the rational account in explaining our knowledge of the thing about which we have a rational account. And so Plato says, we can't come up with a good theory about how it is that we perceptually categorize triangles, precisely because our theory just tells us that we have a true opinion that's informed by, well, our ability to categorize triangles. And so it doesn't look like it's informative. And in particular, he says it looks like it's circular in a bad way. It doesn't deepen our understanding of things. It doesn't tell us how we can go from not knowing to knowing. It only tells us how we can go from knowing something to maybe knowing something else. So we'll finish the lectures on the Theaetetus by going through and taking stock of what we've observed. I'll reiterate some points that I made earlier. I'll talk about some things that I developed in the context of the lecture and get us a better understanding of epistemology, about theories of knowledge, and so on, by looking at how Plato engages in theorizing in epistemology.